Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast. Again, thank you for tuning in. We really mean it. Every single time you guys tune into one of our podcasts, it means a lot that, all the content that we're putting out there is being listened, and we love your feedback. So please leave us a review on Apple iTunes or send us a message on Instagram or on our website. We love hearing from the listeners. So again, thank you for the loyalty of tuning in. You have a lot of podcasts that you can be listening to. So thank you. Today, we have an amazing guest. Her name is Sarah, and she's a co-founder and CEO of SOTAOG. She's recognized as one of the top 50 women leaders of Houston for 2022. In 2017, Robert and her shared the vision to generate additional operating cash flow for heavy industrials. In 2021, in August, SOTAOG received their first institutional seed investment, and it was from Google for startups. That's really cool. And we're going to find out a little bit more of what it's like working for Google as a startup. She also started her career working in the oil and gas industry right out of college after she graduated from electrical and computer engineering. And she started off with Marathon, and then she went on to Carrizo Oil to eventually become the co-founder and CEO of SOTAOG. So we're very excited. What a great background, Sarah, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I really enjoy listening to you girls. Love all of the guests that you all have had before. So excited to be here.
Well, we're really excited when you said yes, and we think your story is just one of those amazing ones. So let's let listeners know about where you came from. We know that when we spoke, you were from the Middle East. You grew up with Indian parents. You know, they wanted to have a better living for you and your family and your brothers, sisters. And through that, you actually ended up also moving to Canada, where y'all immigrated there. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up, and then what made your parents eventually move?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk about that. So this is 1980s, right? And my mom, she moved to Dubai for a living. She was a nurse. And then she got married, and my dad moved over. And that's how I was born in Dubai. I was their first daughter. And I do have one sister. She's about 4 years younger than me. So we were two girls. My parents decided that was great. So yeah, I grew up in the Middle East. I was 10. It was all great until we moved to Saudi Arabia. So Dubai, at the time that I was growing up, there were no restrictions. When we went to Saudi Arabia, things were a little bit different. So again, you've got to think about this in 1992. It's interesting at that time, we lived in Dubai, we had heard about the restrictions. We didn't really know much about it until we actually got there. And my dad had two girls. So we had to cover up. I had to cover up. I remember covering up when I had to go to school. And the boys and the girls were split up. We had two different divisions. And you see a lot of interesting things, though your parents don't support it. Now you are in this culture where women can't drive, and you have if we had to go to the store, we had to be accompanied by our dad. And as a young girl, you're kind of seeing all this. It's not that your parents necessarily think women should be treated less than. Like, my mom was a nurse. My dad really respected my mom. And, I didn't really see that in my household. Mm-hmm. But as a culture, as a young girl, you're seeing a lot of this outside, but your parents cannot control. Mm-hmm. So, so I was, so my dad, I couldn't go to school past grade 10. So he had to make arrangements to figure out what I'm going to do after grade 10.
Wow.
It's shocking, right? You think about it and you go. Or the other option, if we were going to stay in Saudi Arabia, was for me to drive, or my dad to put me on a bus for an hour and a half to go to another girls' school. Again, this is 1996. So my dad decided, hey, why don't we try to move countries? Or he was going to actually send me to one of the better schools in India to finish up college. Finish up my last 2 years and go to college. But the problem was we were going to be split up as a family. And I really wanted to stay close to my dad and my mom. So we had some friends that actually migrated to Canada very successfully. And they gave my dad pointers, my dad and a bunch of his friends. We all actually moved to Calgary. But a couple of us moved to Calgary, a couple of them moved to Toronto, 1996. I was 16 when I landed in Calgary. And finished high school there and actually went for my first year at University of Calgary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic coming from Saudi Arabia to Calgary and being able to drink.
Yeah. A lot of freedom for sure, is what it seems like. But more important, I think part of the story is your dad played such a huge role that, his daughter is now a CEO, which is really interesting, knowing what kind of background you had growing up. And like you said, it was more the circumstances and the culture. But I guess we owe it to your dad for saying, like, I want better for my daughters than to stay here and move across the world, literally, to Calgary, and kind of lead that foundation of like, I'm coming here for you guys to have a better future and do something with your lives. So I'm sure as a young girl, once you arrived to Calgary, it was like, the world is my oyster. I can thrive to be better. Did you think when you were going through school, like, I want to own a business one day, I want to be an entrepreneur? Was that in you, or did it just happen?
Well, I had always seen my dad never pass up on an opportunity. So, in Dubai, the reason we moved to Saudi Arabia was my dad was able to double his salary. And he got our housing was paid for, and we had family trips that was paid for. So that was the primary driver for my dad to move to Saudi Arabia. And my mom could stay home with us and she didn't have to go to work. So because I had seen my dad always never turn down an opportunity, and he never got that many. It's not like he got 100 opportunities and he got to pick one or two. He got few. So I knew that if my dad worked that hard and could do all of this, I just shouldn't turn down opportunities, was what I had learned growing up with him. And my dad, interestingly, yes, my dad plays a huge role, and I'm very inspired by my dad because my dad, unlike most families, he actually comes from a very poor family. None of his parents were educated. He was one of the first to go to school and get a college degree. My mom comes from a different background. She comes from an educated family and everything else. But the fact that he got to marry my mom and everything else was because he had a degree and he did well in school. And his first job, he started to thrive and excel because he worked hard. So if you can understand, I see a lot of these dynamics, right? Growing up, I hear a lot of these stories. So I'm definitely determined to do my best with whatever resources I have. And work hard.
Where you're at today. And I think one of the really interesting things is when you decided to actually go into oil and gas, you had another opportunity. You could have actually went to work for Disney. So I think a lot of us sitting here today would be like, oh, Disney would be such an amazing place to work. You graduated with electrical and computer engineering degrees. So what made you go into electrical specifically? And then why oil and gas over Disney?
So it was the money, to make it simple. I had few loans, like my parents weren't really rich, as I had mentioned. So just financing my education. And if you can understand, though my parents were very forward thinking, there's a lot of variations of how forward thinking you are. And my parents still had that, Middle East, Indian culture. So they were thinking, well, you got these three offers, you should just pick the best and the highest paying one. And Marathon Refinery, actually, I joined the downstream location, which was out of Ohio. And we were in Michigan at that time. My dad had moved for job again. So it was closer. They could be closer to me. So for all those reasons, they encouraged me to take it. So yeah, and Marathon had offered, I think, 10,000 more. What was that? It's amazing. It was like 56,000 a year. It seemed like a lot of money. Yeah, so.
That's,
And I think Disney was a little bit lower.
we've had a lot of people on the podcast say that one of the reasons they picked that one role in oil and gas was because the salary was double or just a lot more. And that's why a lot of people get pushed into oil and gas. And so tell us your time at Marathon. You were there for about 7 years, I believe, working on different projects. You moved to Houston. You mentioned that, in Dubai, you would see all these big towers and buildings, but it was filled with men. And then, you were now in the Marathon Tower in Houston, and you kind of felt like, well, I made it, I'm here. How was that dynamic like? Obviously working in oil and gas, male dominated industry. How did you make an impact or move up the ladder in those 7 years, especially being a woman and, coming from a different background? Was it ever challenging where you your voice wasn't heard or you didn't have a seat at the table?
Yeah, obviously. And, being in Ohio, and Michigan and Ohio are conservative cultures, respectively. They're far more conservative in what you see in Houston, just because the women aren't there. So it's not that. So I always talk about unintentional bias and intentional bias. There's a difference. Unintentional bias is where they just don't have experience with ambitious women that do great work. They're more used to seeing women at home. So it's just an unintentional bias that they don't have good memories or experiences with women that do an exceptionally great job, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a lingering bias in Ohio, actually. And it was interesting. As big as the company it was, someone actually, I still remember, made a comment that I was probably a diversity hire or I was a quota hire. And that's how I made it in. And
I think a lot of us have had that. Yeah. I've had that too. Yeah.
And what was it? And happened to be, and this was in a small town, Findlay, Ohio, is where Marathon was headquartered, Downstream was headquartered. It still is. And I was named like the Indian girl from the third floor. Like I would go to a grocery store and people, that's how they remembered me.
Wow.
There's a 30,000 population town. So the good thing going for me was I was very memorable. Everyone knew who I was, even if I didn't know them. And the downside was like if I went to a bar, someone from Marathon might be there, and yeah. I would have to watch who I was and what I did. And because of that conservative culture, they're watching. Like I would, honestly, they would look at how many drinks I'm having, though they're 2 tables away. So I started to use that to my advantage. Because now you have a control over how you project yourself and what you do. So I started to build a lot of early relationships, and a lot more people are open to it. So, and it was interesting. Later, I found out that first years or new grads, they give us projects that fail. Like they expect it to fail. They don't really care about it. They're $200,000. They don't really. Yeah. It's not big money, but I was exceptional in when my projects did succeed. And the reason behind it wasn't because I was a great engineer. It was because I could convince the technicians to work harder on my projects. And I had this, how do you say it? This really unique skill to connect with people on my projects, to work harder and move it further. So I would be under budget. I would finish ahead of schedule, not because I was great, but because I was just able to do that. And I still remember, I was like 22, and one of my projects had gone out for bid, and a vendor got it. We awarded it. The procurement team awards it. Mm-hmm. And the vendor called me and said, "You know what? We are so excited about winning this project. Mostly because we get to work with you. Like, forget the project." And I was like, I know it's small money, it wasn't nice. But yeah, so I realized that was a skill that I probably had developed because my parents had moved in so many countries. You had to make friends, different cultures, different people. different people that don't look like you, that look like you, they're speaking different languages, and So.
That's a really big skill, actually. Very interesting that you're saying that, because and you said it like it wasn't because I was the smartest engineer, I was the smartest person in the room, but I think we tend to forget that it's not just about brains, but how you can interact with people and how you can play chess, right? With I need this person to help me, and it is a skill. It's not like everyone's good at that. So that's really interesting. And I think maybe that's why I know later on when you started SOTAOG, you said you weren't in sales. You weren't like a salesperson. Obviously, if you look at your resume, you didn't do a stint in sales, but this trait of yours of convincing people and getting them to get you what you want has obviously helped out when you close your first, sale. Can you talk to us a little bit about when we're fast forwarding, you start SOTAOG and then you're like, oh, wait, I'm also the salesperson. I'm the CEO. You have to wear multiple hats. How did you transition to get someone to buy in on your idea?
So it was hard, right? Like it was survival mode. I mean, if I didn't bring a contract in, like we didn't get funding, there wasn't an investor or anyone else. I literally had to fund it with my first client. And I still remember I gave a talk on gas lift optimization based on my historical part. And it was from the facility side on how you can optimize your gas wells and get more oil out. And, it was a fairly, okay, so I'm refrained from saying that. I always want to say it's a simple concept if you understand it. But lots of variables moving around, but there's so much that you can do just from the facilities side that people don't realize. They think you have to be a production engineer. So anyways, give that presentation, and the COO actually wanted to hear more about it and hear how I did it, because it was mostly very expensive in the market at that time. And smaller players couldn't afford it. So at Carrizo, I had deployed it using very minimal resources. Like I did it with a Kimray valve for,
Wow.
So anyways, so he talked to me and he was interested in that, but I really wasn't. I mean, we're doing gas lift, but that wasn't the focus of what we were going to sell. So he said, I said, yeah, I would really like to. I can deploy the gas lift for you. I can do the facilities for you, like optimize operations. And he said, well, you know what? It's the VP of Ops in Midland that makes a decision on this. So you got to talk to him. And I still remember calling him, and he said, you know what? Really, the CEO is in Houston, and the person that makes a decision is me, and you're not going to get 2 hours with me. Just because he said that in Houston doesn't mean you're getting it. Like, okay. And I still remember that call, right? And he said, yes, you can come see me. So I remember so scared. I'm driving, I'm going to Midland to meet one person. I don't have anyone
for
else.
10 minutes, because that's all he's going to give you.
From Houston, right? Oh, I still remember, like, that was so scary for me, because I wanted to know if he had any interest, and he wouldn't tell me if he did. All he said was he had to see me in person. And I'm like, this will be easy if you're in Houston. You're in Midland. Long story short, I go down. So he said, you know what? I don't care about gas lift. I don't care about any of that. And I'm like, okay.
You're like, why did I come here?
What do you want? And he's like, I want to know how much water I dispose, because you see, I spend 500,000 every quarter. And you know what I have to do? I was like, I don't know. What do you do? He said, I sit down here, and this reminds me of Carrizo all over again. And he says, I have to go through production of every well and figure out if they're billing me correctly. I'm like, oh, that's easy to solve. You just put a water meter and you read that number and you figure out your 24-hour total. I was like, all right, why don't you do it for the first one? And literally, that's how we got started, $40,000. And then
wait, so at this point, you had already started SOTAOG. It was in the beginning stages. You didn't have a lot of money. You were funding it yourself. You got this contact. You had to show up and just be the salesperson. And he actually gave you a shot and gave you $40,000 to fix this problem for him.
Yes.
Wow, you must have done a good job to convince them, because I'm telling you, the guys in Midland, especially the older generation, they'll test you on the technical and test you to make sure that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I did though, because this was stuff I had deployed before. I knew which meter to buy. I knew how to hook it up. I mean, I know how to get real-time data from the field. That's so it's interesting when you say that that's easy to do. It's complex, but it's honestly interesting how much of a black box oil and gas operators think it is. Getting real-time data from your field apparently is black magic. Like it's not. And I see vendors everywhere, like in I&E, they always take advantage of it. I'm not sure why, like because the operator is not, I mean, they're educated in drilling and completing a well, but apparently getting real-time data is just like black magic. So they just throw money at people to get it, and then they don't use it. So really this water meter, and the client actually ended up getting $10,000 back because of course he found out it was easy for him to do the reconciliation, and the disposal companies had been overcharging them.
Did you ever find that it was difficult through this process, especially, through your childhood, you saw the struggles of being in a culture where they didn't accept women to go past a certain point. Your dad took initiative, moved you out of that. And now in the oil and gas industry, I'm sure there was some roadblocks where maybe even at sometimes you had the opinions of people that were older than you that maybe thought they knew more, and you're coming in with these new ideas, and then you go and you start this amazing company, but yet you still have those roadblocks to overcome that we see a lot of women, they get stuck on, like they don't know how to get over other people's opinions, have that be, as you mentioned earlier, unconscious bias or just, what they had experienced before. What brought your confidence up, and how did you have the confidence to go and do this? Because I mean, you took a drive in the middle of basically nowhere and you sold something that really wasn't actually a product yet. Can you explain that?
So selling was, it was a product because I had deployed it multiple times before in my career. It's just smaller operators just didn't know how to afford it. Mm-hmm. So that's a different story. But yes, I actually lacked a lot of self-confidence in the beginning. When we started the company and I started to get more projects, I actually had very toxic employees. So forget everybody else. Mm-hmm. Forget who I'm trying to close a contract with. Let's just talk about my own employees. They're older. They're very brash, and they would constantly come over and tell me how I just got lucky, right? Like they downplayed all the hard work I did. And they said, you just got lucky. If you can do it, we can do so much better. And there's no reason we have to listen to you. And I'm working my tail off to give them a salary. And some of these guys are getting paid $180,000 a year and I'm going without a salary. So if you look at the dynamics, I'm going without a salary. They're getting paid $180, and I've got to deal with this toxic attitude. It wears you down a lot. It truly does make you wonder if they're right. Because again, I was raised in a conservative culture where, if they're older and they talk louder and, you kind of listen, you fall in line, you become subordinate to them. Mm-hmm. And then I had this other group, right? My customers that were also trying to take advantage of my pricing. The only part that that helped me transition was really believing in yourself and realizing that you're doing something right, even when no one tells you that. Mm-hmm. Even if you look around and no one's there to tell you that whatever decisions you're making is correct. Not depending on other people to validate who you are. That's so key. And it took a while for me to get there. And I kind of do wish I got there earlier, because I would be a little bit more successful further along the road. Now I'm like 2 years behind because I let them. And then, last year was great. I fired all 3 of them, and I have a great team now.
It's so important, like you mentioned. I think having a good team, especially in a startup environment where I mean, things are hard. You're not getting a salary. There's usually not a lot of money, and you're trying to make this successful. You want everyone to be on the rocket ship together, like to one spot. So it's good that, I think and a team is so important. So I'm glad that you kind of had to, move on and kind of restructure your team. To end, can you tell us a little bit more about, you're obviously a mom, a wife. How is that dynamic with being a startup and not having a salary and having a lot of stress to make sure that this is successful, because your kids are obviously counting on you and your husband's supporting you this entire time as well? Can you tell us a little bit about that dynamic?
So, I mean, it's always a very stressful dynamic, and that's why a lot of people don't do this. But it's emotional, and I think for women it's just harder because we are different from men. I per se don't want to be like a guy or pretend that I am one. So different opinion. So the emotions always get a hold of me, and then you have this tactical stuff that you've got to do, and for me, like, everything goes together, like family, work, all of it is kind of meshed together. It's a tough, stressful dynamic, and the only way you overcome that is by working hard and driving results. Because when you drive results, kind of all of that gets taken care of.
And when you say drive results, do you mean both professionally and personally? So how did you separate, like, being able to, have that time both with your family and then also, progress the company that you created? Was there something that you implemented that really helped you that maybe our listeners could kind of take from?
It's a very strict schedules. So, for example, I get up at like 4 a.m, and so that's the time my kids are sleeping. And then, I work, I get them off to school. So then I'm up, get them ready because I want to spend time with them. Some time I get to spend with them, get them off to school. And then on my way back, I'm off working again. And then at 3, they get off from school. So it's very strict timed stuff. And, and they want to relax. So I'll be working on my phone. And one of the first things the kids say is, Mom, like, you work way too much. But I'm like, but hey, you're watching TV. Like, what do you need me for? We already ate ice cream and we did a craft. Like, you're good. And they're 9 and 10 now. So it's really organizing yourself, making time for everything. Sometimes it does come down to long hours and everything else. But yeah, you just have to do the best you can.
Yeah, well, I think there isn't like a perfect balance, like everybody says so, but like to your point, you just kind of make it work. Yes, you work a lot, you have a schedule, you wake up early, you just make time for it, because at the end of the day, your career and your business is just as important as having a family, and it's okay to want to have both or have it all. Last question is, what was the biggest, most helpful advice that you've received in your career thus far, whether it was when you were starting in the oil field or when you started your company?
So, so a lot of the advice that I had to get was from reading about what other women had done and gone through. A lot of them were men. So, a lot of my girlfriends were not ambitious and they weren't doing all this. And they made good salaries and they were engineers and they were mostly drinking and hanging out and having fun, which I'm jealous of, but I really enjoy what I do. And it gets easier, by the way. The hard work is really hard some days. Like today, a lot of things are easier. Like I have a better team. Like I don't have to listen to a lot of talks. Like it's just easier on so many fronts now. The best advice I think was your potential is much higher than what you think it is. And a lot of times we are our worst critics. And it was interesting how many customers actually came up and told me that, because we do operations, right? So we're not CapEx projects. So we're not like, oh, we're done and gone. We're there every day. So when I actually was recognized as one of the top 50, I remember telling my client, I was like, I can't believe it. Like, do you really think I would? He was like, oh, of course I do. He was like, where are the other 40? Because I don't think I've met. He's so sweet. Yeah. So in a way, a lot of my clients have helped me. They say, hey, the product is much better. And they would say how they would buy it only because of me. And they've never known me or heard of me. But I had built the trust and I've definitely earned the business. And one of them, the first ones always said, you're going to do great, Sarah. You will one day list your company on the market like you want to. So I don't know if that's advice or other people being able to see something that I always don't.
I think that's such great advice. And also it's so true because a lot of times we are our worst critics and we don't ever really compliment ourselves for the hard work that we've done. And it's really great that you even have clients that are doing that for you and recognizing it. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your amazing story and all that you went through growing up to graduating to the, marathon to Carrizo to now starting your own company. It really is inspiring. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. It was so great to be here.
Thank you, Sarah.